Hi guys.
Hello.
For those who don't know me, people call me Bicycle Mark in this community and in other communities. And I've been hanging around the hacker scene in Europe and New York for the last, 10 years maybe. But I always am that social guy. I don't do the technical as much as I do society projects, political projects. I'm a journalist. And my focus has always been stories you don't hear so often, maybe, depending on who you are. And so as Fish said, I'm working on a new project, and I get to come here and tell you about it. The only weird thing about this is something I haven't done yet. I prefer to talk about things I've actually done, you know, the proof and the pudding and so forth. The pudding, these are the ingredients, basically. And this project is something I've been thinking about for years. It's called the Dubai Taxi Project, and I'm working on a slogan. There's a long thread somewhere on the internet arguing about what this slogan should be. So I wrote the longest one possible for you. Stories told by people you rarely hear from in a surprisingly interesting place. So a little bit of why. I have worked as a teacher of journalism in places like Afghanistan, Kosovo, the Republic of Georgia, Egypt, and my favorite had to have been Afghanistan. I've worked there twice, 2010 and 2011. And one of the cool side effects I didn't expect back then was that I get to stop in Dubai on my way to Afghanistan, because Dubai is one of the only airports that would serve Afghan airlines. European airports refuse them because the Afghan standards are, well, they're still not up to par. So thankfully Dubai will let shitty airplanes land there still. And that's fine with me, you know. I watched guys sort of pull the door closed as we're taxiing to leave. And I felt pretty confident because they looked like they really knew how the door works. I don't know who that guy is in the front seat, but he knows how airplane doors work. See you soon. See you soon. Yeah.
Video overline.
Yeah. So on these trips to Dubai, I'd spend like 4 or 5 days. Usually preparing visas, because you can get an express visa to Afghanistan. This is useful information for you. And hanging out. It was sort of a preparation. You could buy equipment. I mean, it's not like the paradise of electronics, but you can get some Android phones on your way to Afghanistan, where we might distribute them for different projects. And one of the things I realized is we were taking taxis everywhere, because you have to. There's no real public transport. I mean, there are buses, and actually air-conditioned bus stops that really come in handy. But mostly it's a taxi world. The taxi department, or the transportation department, actually is in charge of taxis, so it's kind of like public transport in a way for Dubai, but it's somehow private as well. The point about this, or the point for me, was back then, taxi drivers were super interesting. Now I know that in lots of countries of the world, taxi drivers are interesting. But the thing in Dubai was something I'd never heard before. I mean, I grew up in New York, although no one can afford to take a taxi anymore, but when you have to, you do. And you could talk to a taxi driver. In Amsterdam, people, talk to taxi drivers. I mean, they're making a lot of money. They're not the nicest people. But Dubai taxi drivers, first of all, they're not from Dubai. As you may have heard, very few people in Dubai are from Dubai. And I'll give you some of the numbers in a bit. But what I remember best is just, I'd be sitting in traffic, and this guy sitting next to me would start telling me about his family in Pakistan, and what his son's dream is. And one Afghan driver said to me, "Oh, you're going to my country? That's pretty cool. If you really had time, you should go to Oman." And he proceeded for half an hour to tell me why Oman is the coolest country. I had never even thought about going to Oman. It's now on my itinerary for this project, actually. So what I thought back then was, shit, I record stories all the time, but I'm always on my way somewhere. This is actually the destination. I should be coming here, and I want to ride in taxis and record these taxi driver stories. Now, this is not revolutionary. This is not even a new idea. I am not an innovator. But this is something I wanted to do, and I did a little bit of searching, and there hasn't really been much done on Dubai taxi drivers. So I thought to myself, well, I can do it. I know how. I've seen how it works. I have friends locally. They'll give me a place to stay. This could work. So I wanted to tell you, one of the inspirations for this whole project is actually a guy named Tony Schwartz. He died long ago. He died in 2008. I never met him. But Tony Schwartz was this guy who, he was obsessed with audio. He had one of the first, I think you call it reel-to-reel recording devices, and it was mini reel-to-reel, so You know, it was like the size of my iPad. You just put it in your giant coat and go out and record people. And he would do that. And I guess it was back in the day where this wasn't so secretive or offensive, because he would have a microphone like in his sleeve, and he would just go around recording everyone. I mean, he'd be arrested as a creep these days, but back then, you know, he was an innovator, and he actually wrote to, I think it was Sony that produced this recorder, I could be wrong. He asked Sony for the addresses of other people who got these first recorders, because they were very expensive, and he found these people in South Africa, I think in the UK and elsewhere in Europe, and he wrote to them, and he sent them audio recordings of his life, where he explained his world. This is all so easily done now. And these guys would send recordings to him of traditional things. I remember a guy from South Africa sending him recordings of different tribes in South Africa playing their music. And, you know, again, back in the day, this was exciting. So Tony Schwartz was a sort of innovator. He was agoraphobic, so they say, so he wouldn't leave his zip code. That's a really weird agoraphobia to have. But then again, I seem to have that during the week. I don't leave my zip code. I have everything I need in Oud-West, Amsterdam. But he would, thankfully he lived in Midtown Manhattan. So if you're going to be agoraphobic, you're still going to be able to really have contact with the entire world in that great neighborhood. So he would record everything. One of my favorites is the taxi driver recordings. He would get in a cab, and even though he had his problem with public spaces, he would go for a few blocks in the cab. And I guess he did this so often that he would just carry his recorder with him through the sleeve, and he would record taxi drivers. And back in those days, you know, it was like, let me tell you, kids these days, and they would go on in the cab, and it was just humans telling stories of their lives, of their dreams, of their thoughts on politics and that kind of thing. And in the end, he had this amazing collection. He did a few other projects that I love. He did, this image is from one of his most famous commercials. He made commercials. He was the audio guy, but he realized visuals were important. And this is that old Lyndon Johnson. It was a political campaign. Basically what happens is she's counting dandelion leaves, going 1, 2, 3, and an atomic bomb explodes in the background. And it was a commercial for Lyndon Johnson's campaign. I believe he lost. He had been president after the assassination, but and it was about how like he's irresponsible with nuclear weapons. Like if you elect him, you know, while this little girl is playing in the field, a nuclear bomb will go off. And Tony Schwartz was a sort of expert in messing with sound and conversations and natural sounds. So he's one of my big inspirations for this whole thing. And I'm going to mention him a lot when I do this project because he did it first. I just want to do it in Dubai. Very random, but yeah. You all have heard of Dubai. I mean, that's another thing that's interesting about doing this project. Most people haven't been there. More and more people have, but everybody's got a sort of impression. I mean, there's Vegas. If I say Vegas, you've got an idea in your head of something. Even if I've never been to Vegas, but I have tons of ideas in my head. Same thing now, Dubai. It's not the same kind of place, but you have pictures in your head. Some people think of the skyline, of the Burj Khalifa. Maybe somebody saw that Mission Impossible film that I haven't seen yet, where apparently Tom Cruise, I don't know, he falls out of it. He has a sandwich on the top floor. I have no idea. So it's this image. I mean, the slogan of the city. I looked it up. You know, you have the Big Apple. Amsterdam is the, I don't know, what is it? It has no slogan. But
red light is great.
Amsterdam is the red light city, in fact. Paris is the city of lights. Dubai is actually called the city of gold. I don't know if this is going to take off as a slogan, but that's their slogan. And of course, what we also know about Dubai is most people aren't even from there. 80%, in fact, of the population. We're talking now a population of about 8 million people, and 6 million of them are not actually from Dubai. And that group is divided between all kinds of, they're not even called immigrants, right? They're called migrants. Some of them are the so-called like banking and high-end migrants, and most of them are the people that make the city run. They drive the cabs, they clean the hotels, they make the food, they build the buildings. And even though, and we were just talking about Hack in the Box, when it was in Dubai, there's been this decline over the last few years because, in fact, you know, oil prices, despite what they are, they actually went down the whole. So it's been a bad couple of years for Dubai, but they're still building all kinds of things. The world's biggest airport it's been built, but it's not yet reached the status of the world's biggest airport, but that's the goal, and they'll reach it, weirdly enough. They've got it. They're still one of the biggest markets for things like gold, among other things. And so Dubai isn't what it was, but at the same time continues to be the #1 destination. Actually, this whole region, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, is the #1 region for migrants in the world right now. So depending on how you want to look at it, it's the New York of the late 1800s when people were coming from everywhere on ships, and it's the one of, because we have a lot of these places in the world. So one of the things I was counting on is the fact that maybe Dubai doesn't grab your heart or anything like that, but the idea of leaving your home and working somewhere else and sending your money home to your family and living in this world that isn't yours, I think a lot of us can relate to it, or we know somebody who does that. I mean, we know these stories. So you don't have to love Dubai as much as what my hope is that my audience has an interest in these sort of human stories and moving. It's so standard in our world. So I still consider this city an example of who we are on the planet. So that's what I'm kind of counting on when I do this. I can tell you tons of what I already know about migrant workers in Dubai, but I don't want to bore you right now. It's interesting. It's a lot of people from Asia and the Middle East, primarily. So I'm going to be sitting in cabs with Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi drivers primarily. I want to also meet Iraqi and Egyptian drivers. It's a huge population now. And after that, it'll get more difficult. Like, there's women's cabs, but that's only for women. So either I send a proxy, put on a wig, I don't know, but it's going to be harder to do that thing. And family cabs, it's going to be tricky for me to hire a family to appear with me in the family cab. So I might not do those things. Let me tell you about the campaign. So I am an independent journalist. At different times, I'm hired, like a lot of us, as a freelancer, and I write or I do audio, and then that job goes away, and I'm hungry again, and I have to go find more work. I've cooperated with people over the years. I've done a crowdfunded campaign last year for North Africa, where we went to Tunisia, Egypt, and even Lebanon, which isn't in North Africa, and we did interviews with artists to talk about the revolution of 2 years ago, and what it all means to them and what they're doing. But that was me collaborating with someone famous in journalism terms, so I was a junior partner. And we raised $25,000 for a 1-month mission. Great. But that was with his name and his audience, right? So I decided I want to do this on my own. Now, I've had a website for 11 years. My website has always been about underreported news, commenting on what's happening in the world, and my travels. So doing this Kickstarter campaign was kind of like, all right, I have my audience. Some people know me from my blog. Some people know me from actually the hacker community. Wherever they are, I'm going to propose this project to them. I'm going to do these interviews in Dubai, and you guys are going to, not you guys, but they're going to help fund me. And I'll use Kickstarter because, and I know there are other systems, a lot of us probably have donated to stuff. I donated to Mailpile not too long ago. I don't know if you guys like Mailpile, but I was interested. I met those guys at Hacker Camp, and I thought, I would use it when it's ready, and I would support them. They used Indiegogo, which I'm interested in, but my thing was, as you can hear, I'm American, and although my support is kind of equal between, actually more than North America, Europe, it's kind of global, but still, I wanted a system that more people were just going to go, oh yeah, okay, I have an account, click, support mark, okay. So I was counting on the name recognition, which held kind of true. A lot of people jumped up and said, okay, Kickstarter, sure, support. I didn't have to explain what Kickstarter was. But on the other hand, so I've done this Kickstarter campaign, it passed its month. I set a goal of basically $5,000 because that's what I calculated was enough to pay my costs and also pay for life, because I forgot to do that in my last crowdfunding campaign. I only raised enough money, or I got enough money for the actual trip and my equipment, and then I came home and I had to pay the rent, and I was like, didn't I just do a successful campaign? Oh, I forgot to put in money for the rent. So that's the big change as well. Like, when I proposed this project, I thought to myself, I need to make money to live during the time I'm working. So that's now built in. That's one of those crowdfunding things maybe people would debate, or people that I forgot, that last time. So I did the Kickstarter campaign, and I got what I consider to be very small numbers in terms of supporters. I got 125 people. That's low. I don't want to sit around talking about statistics, but let's say my audience is a few thousand people. It's not higher than 10,000, and it's probably not much higher than 5,000 to be honest, but it's in there. Yet the actual people that stepped forward and said, here's 5 to one girl who I don't know gave me $555, which is, she's my record holder. I don't know who she is. And the trick is, though, I'd expect more people, less money, or more people paying less money per person. But that's not how it worked out. It was just 125 people, and I reached my goal and even a little bit over. So the project is funded. You can look at the names and say, who are these people? And oh, there's a lot of my family members on there, which is weird, I got to admit. I didn't want to see so many of my family members. I can't stop them, and I need the funding. But I would rather have people who aren't in my family, who don't even know me that well, because then you know it's about your work, and it's not so much about being a nice guy, or in my mom's case, is she worried that I'm going to be hungry? Why did she send $100? You know. So that's where it's weird. You know, you want to say like a lot of Kickstarter successes present themselves as like, oh, it was a huge success. But I'm not going to bullshit. Like, I'm successful, but I have questions about Kickstarter, its fees, who's on that list. So these are things, if you ever do a crowdfunding campaign, you're going to think about these things too. Anyway, got it. It's done. The money is in. Now it's a matter of planning. I go in January 6th. I'll stay 16 days. My plan, I've tried to outline each day. I plan to take 6 cab rides, minimum of 4 per day. My first few days cab rides will be short. I want to see how it feels. I'm not going to pull out a microphone until I get comfortable and they seem comfortable. I might take 2 long rides that'll be more than an hour. I want to go to Oman by taxi, and I'm hoping that during that Oman taxi ride, that'll develop into a longer conversation. And I plan on releasing this as a podcast series on my website, and then see who else is interested to take it and share it. And I want to write on the topic. There's a newspaper in Dubai that's interested, which I guess is nice to talk to expats in Dubai, all million of them. But I'm curious about being able to write about this for other outlets out there in the world. So that's the project, basically. What I'm hoping to hear is, of course, the personal stories. I like family stories, but I'm also into the taxi driver who will tell me about Bangladeshi politics in a way I've never heard before. Or a lot of these people have lived long lives in different countries, actually, trying to make it work. So I'm curious to hear those stories as well. So it's not just about family stories, it's about observations. And, you know, I'm also Portuguese, and in Portugal we think cab drivers are all sort of right-wing idiots who never stop talking. And I get that that's a risk, but in Dubai it's always felt like cab drivers are all really unique individuals. They got a lot of different things on their minds. They've got crazy stories too, because that city attracts everything from money to desperation, and that always equals interesting. So I'm counting on that city to play a factor, and these people in this city and this time that we live in. I'm counting on that to be a lot of fun. So it all begins really next month, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, and I'll put a few things for following. Some people are still sending me money through PayPal because they prefer, or Flatter, because they don't want to send through Kickstarter. The beauty is I already reached the goal with Kickstarter, so I don't care anymore about that. It's settled. But that's always amazing. Like, the community still is sending money and that sort of thing. But mostly I'm just hoping that people follow the journey now. And that's it. That's my story. Questions? Forgot to write that. Questions?
And for the average taxi driver, what's his amount of hours he needs to work to earn his regular food?
So they're a mix of stories, but no one owns their own. Rarely do they own their own taxi. That would be interesting to find someone. And they end up having these quotas to fill. And once you have to hit the quota of, like, you end up driving between 8 and 16 hours in a day. It's bad. It gets really bad. And the weird part is there's a lot of fees. You owe the taxi company a fee. Your uniform costs something like $200, which is crazy. They're nice uniforms. But it's considered third best taxi system in the world, according to, like, you know, tourism, like TripAdvisor. Mm-hmm. Tokyo, Singapore, apparently. And then third is Dubai. We'll see. But so then after you pay all these hidden fees, I've heard you end up with like €200 a month. And apparently these guys send it all home. The cab drivers that I've spoken to, wish I could have recorded them back then, they live in dorms, sort of like, you know, 5-room apartment with 2 guys, 3 guys in each room. Yeah. They're usually not very happy about that.
Mhm.
If you bring that up, you get a lot of just, oh, my house, oh, these people I live with, oh, you know. I mean, I'm interested in that, but I'm hoping to get beyond. You know, people are writing to me and saying, like, you should record about the exploitation of construction workers, and I get it, but I'm not going to be running off to sort of, I'm not doing some hard-hitting piece. If I hit on the truth, which is painful, fine. But if some guy is just pleasant despite all the shit, fine as well. I was worried actually that the government would get pissed at me. But I've been checking around in Dubai, especially there's going to be an article on me in the newspaper, the expat newspaper, and I said, oh, isn't this bad? And everybody I speak to in Dubai says, government doesn't care. If you were going to curse the Dubai Expo 2020, they'd be really pissed, and they might reject your visa. But if you just want to do stories about cab drivers, bad or good, they don't care. So, yay if that stays true.
Are you going to release any podcasts during your
Yes.
trip? So if we have any questions, we can just ask them?
During the trip?
Yeah?
Yeah, sure. I plan on
Live in the taxi?
no.
Could be
So
fun.
far, no. Interesting idea. I was thinking of, I've been looking at a couple of publishers here in the Netherlands that do like ebooks now, and a lot, so they're interactive. So as you're reading, you mention a character and there's a photo, you can just hit the guy's name and there's a photo. It's very Wikipedia-like.
Mhm.
And you mention a neighborhood and there's a map. I would like to do some kind of an ebook. Probably have to learn to make them myself. I actually haven't learned how to do that yet. And I would like to add my own multimedia features, which would be like, maybe I'll record my GPS, and see where I end up and publish it somehow, maybe after,
Mhm.
where I've been going regularly, maybe it matters. So I'm thinking about recording that extra information for publishing later.
So what do you expect to get out of it? You will just do just the stories, or will you start extracting stuff out of it and combining and researching around?
On the surface, I would be happy with getting the human stories, no matter how personal and simple they are. That's my first priority. After that, I'm going to look at all the stories, and I want to write about the experience. So I want it to be like a travel, experience, a travel log of what I learned doing this, what I was wrong about, and then look at the big picture and see if there are things I could write about. The whole question of life there, and is this good what we've done, this world we've set up this way, this city. So the bigger conclusions I might do once I've gathered everything. But maybe there won't be any big conclusions. So that would be kind of extra. I hope to see patterns, or I hope to see something I can write about when I step back from the whole trip. There's a journalist there, she's actually German. She's a good friend of mine, and she's hosting me for most of this trip. And she's interested in writing about it for German newspapers. And I said, you give me a place to stay, you can listen to all my interviews and read all my notes, and if you want to write some articles, I think I would be okay with that. Put me down as a helper. So I'm curious to see what other people would do with my data as well. Data sounds very scientific. But that's it. The goals are not low, but reachable. And then after that, everything is a bonus. All right, thanks, guys. Oh, there's a...
Are you worried about any critics or worried about the government when you stumble upon any critic story of someone which you are writing for?
I've had a lot of assurances, I still worry, but I've had a lot of assurances from journalists there saying they just won't care. And I'm amazed by it, actually. I'm still worried that taxi drivers themselves, when I pull out a microphone, they'll go, hey, no. So I'm trying to figure out how to get around stuff like that. But I'm not really worried about the government anymore. Also, I'm thinking if I get anything that's super critical about the system there, I might save that show for when I've left the country.
And then you never...
I'm banned.
Yeah, you're banned. You're never going to be back there.
Yeah, but I from every piece of feedback I get, apparently I don't need to worry about that because I'm a small fish and they've got much bigger things going on.
Maybe the government are 80% migrants themselves.
No, no, they're all Emiratis, but they are, like this whole thing of being worried about the working conditions in Dubai. That's been going on for 10 years now. I mean, it's a known topic, and the government itself is trying to do stuff. You can say not very good job, but they're trying to do stuff. So they're into the idea that someone's going to talk with their cab drivers. So they're not as like protective. And they're doing stuff with these governments, like Indian government. Actually, I'm going to talk about that a little bit. They have like programs now for like an insurance program for Indian workers. The Indian government put it up, and it's for people in the UAE, for Indians in the UAE. So apparently the government is interested in projects like mine. As long as they don't tell me what to do, I don't mind if they go like, keep going, yay. If they give me free tea, I think I'll be okay with that.
Are you dreaming on a few projects like this? Like Singapore or Tokyo?
India.
I don't know India. I mean, I read Shantaram, and I'm afraid that if anything happens in a cab, a crowd will come and beat me up. Apparently, that's what happens in India.
I camped for 2 weeks in India, in different cabs.
Yeah.
2 weeks long ride, like 9,000 kilometers. Really a nice experience.
Yeah.
The people differ a lot from here, but it's nice to hear their side of the story, and you will come across a lot of different beliefs.
Yeah. I don't know. I hadn't thought about it as a series because I felt like this has all been done. I just happen to be interested in maybe one of the last cities where it hasn't been done, and where every cab driver seems to speak English, in my experience. So that's interesting too. If I had to use a translator, it would be harder, it wouldn't be the same. But India is an interesting case where you were getting stories apparently in English. So far, aim low. One city, one series.
India was an English colony before.
Of course, and technically the government language and the functioning language is English, but what I always hear is not everybody's into speaking English necessarily, or they're not good at it.
If you're a tourist, everybody speaks it.
Everybody speaks English. Maybe India would be something. I'm open to stuff like that, but I have all these other interests, like decaying port cities of Europe. I mean, that's really on my menu for the next few years. So I want to go to decaying port cities and record with old dock workers like Lech Walesa. But yeah, cab drivers, there could be a future in this.
Are you gonna parallel your experience to what this Schmidt guy did? Because you could.
This always happens to me. Some guy did something great and I don't know about it.
Oh no.
Oh, Schwartz.
Sorry, something with SGH.
Yeah.
Are you gonna reference it? Because it seems like interesting source material to contrast with.
I want to talk about it a lot because if I taught a class, I would teach about what he did and how he was. I think my work isn't going to be as cool as his, but maybe I'll be like
to raise it up.
Yeah. I want him to be like my reference point because that's honestly what is my reference point. When I saw this guy, I mean, he's a total pack rat. They found so many recordings in his house after
Where
that.
can we learn more about this guy?
TonySchwartz.org, but when you I think it's TonySchwartz.org, or if you Google him, Tony Schwartz Audio. He did something that I love. He did time-lapse photos, of course. He did a audio lapse, or an audio time-lapse of his niece from baby to 13 years of age in 2 minutes. You hear the baby become the toddler, and you hear her start to talk, and then speak like almost like an adult. And he was just obsessed. He did one called A Dog's Life. I don't know how many minutes it is, but it's everything that once a year he would record the dog, either barking, walking, people talking to the dog. So he has a compressed version of A Dog's Life in audio. And I'm not going to be interviewing dogs, but I think he's crazy awesome.
Great,
yeah. And if you go to the website, you'll see lots of interviews with him, and that's how I first heard. I was listening to a podcast that talked about it. And I was like, oh, yeah, I like it. All right, okay, Mark.